Master Sergeant Cole Davidson had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, but nothing had prepared him for the text message that arrived as his transport plane touched down at Fort Carson. 4 years of deployment, for birthdays missed, for anniversaries celebrated alone by his wife, Lindsay, and this was his homecoming. "Please don't ruin our day by coming home. The kids don't want you here either. Stay away." Cole stared at the screen, his weathered hands steady despite the earthquake in his chest. Around him, other soldiers embraced their families, tears of joy mixing with Colorado's crisp air. He had imagined this moment countless times during firefights in Kandahar, during lonely nights in forward operating bases, and during the endless months of wondering if he'd ever see his family again. "Understood?" He typed back one word: clean. Finally, Cole had learned long ago that emotions were a luxury he couldn't afford. In the Rangers, hesitation meant danger. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness got people hurt. He walked past the reunion area, ignoring the curious glances from other families. His duffel bag felt lighter than the weight now settling in his chest, not of sadness, but of cold calculation. Cole Davidson didn't break. He adapted, he overcame, and he never, ever forgot a betrayal. 20 minutes later, he sat in a rental car outside his own home, a modest 2-story colonial in Colorado Springs that he bought with combat pay and dreams of normalcy. Through the window, he could see balloons tied to the mailbox. His birthday balloons. The irony wasn't lost on him. A silver BMW sat in his driveway. Not Lindsay's Honda, someone else's car. Someone who was celebrating his birthday in his house with his wife and his children. Cole had always been a methodical man. In reconnaissance, you gathered intelligence before you acted. You learned your adversary's patterns, their weaknesses, their pressure points. Only then did you strike. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to his bank. Yes, he needed access to his accounts immediately. The second was to his lawyer, an old Army buddy named Frank Russo, who had helped him with his will before deployment. The third was to a contact he'd made in military intelligence, someone who owed him a favor from Kabul. "Danny, it's Cole Davidson. I need a background check. Full spectrum. Yes, I know it's not standard protocol. That's why I'm calling you." By evening, Cole had checked into a hotel downtown. He ordered room service and spread the preliminary information across his bed like a tactical map. Lindsay Davidson, née Roberts, 28 years old, married to him for 7 years. Mother to Emma, 6, and Tyler, 4. No prior criminal record, no significant debts. But the BMW was registered to Ryan Fletcher, 31, a personal trainer at the upscale gym where Lindsay had started working out 8 months ago. 8 months. Cole had been counting the days until his return, and she had been counting days with another man. His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter Emma. "Daddy, Mommy says, you don't want to see us anymore. Why don't you love us?" Cole set the phone aside without responding. The message wasn't from Emma. His 6-year-old couldn't spell that well, couldn't construct sentences that complex. Lindsay was using his children as pawns. That was her first tactical error. In the Rangers, they had a saying, "The enemy always reveals themselves." Lindsay had just shown him she was willing to damage his relationship with his children to protect her secret. That told him everything he needed to know about who he was dealing with. Cole opened his laptop and began researching, not just Ryan Fletcher, but the entire world orbiting his former life. Lindsay's job at the marketing firm, her friends, her social media presence, her new routines. He cross-referenced credit card statements he still had access to, traced phone records, and mapped out a complete picture of how his life had been taken apart in his absence. By midnight, he had identified 17 points of vulnerability in their lives: financial, social, professional, legal. He learned that Ryan Fletcher had been dismissed from 2 previous gyms for inappropriate relationships with clients. He discovered that Lindsay had taken out a credit card in both their names and maxed it out on a trip to Aspen with Ryan. But most importantly, he learned that neither of them knew he was back. Lindsay assumed he was still deployed, that his understood message had come from overseas. They thought they had time to prepare, to craft their story, to figure out how to handle his eventual return. They were wrong. Cole closed the laptop and lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. 4 years ago, he'd left as a husband and father. Tonight, he was something else entirely, something forged in the crucible of heartbreak and tempered by military precision. Tomorrow, he would begin the systematic unraveling of everything they thought they'd built atop the ruins of his sacrifice. Cole woke at 0500 hours as he had every day for the past 4 years. Routine was survival, discipline was strength. He dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain black t-shirt and a baseball cap, and drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from his house. From there he could watch the street but remain unnoticed. Classic surveillance positioning. At 7:23 a.m., the silver BMW backed out of his driveway. Through his binoculars, Cole watched as Ryan Fletcher adjusted the rearview mirror, displaying the casual confidence of a man who believed he belonged there. Ryan was tall, lean in the way that came from vanity rather than functional strength. His physique spoke of pretty boy muscles built for mirrors, not for combat. 20 minutes later, Lindsay emerged with the children. Cole's chest tightened as he watched Emma skip down the sidewalk, her blonde hair bouncing in pigtails. Tyler clutched a toy airplane, one Cole had sent him for Christmas from Afghanistan. They looked happy and healthy. They looked like a family. That observation wasn't sentiment, it was intelligence. Lindsay had successfully created a replacement family structure. The children had bonded with Ryan. This wasn't just a casual relationship. It was a complete substitution. She hadn't just betrayed Cole, she'd erased him. Cole followed at a distance as Lindsay dropped the kids at school, then continued to her job at Morrison & Associates, a mid-tier marketing firm in downtown Colorado Springs. He noted her parking spot, her entrance time, her routine. At lunch, she met Ryan at a cafe near his gym. They sat close, fingers intertwined, sharing food like teenagers in love. Cole photographed everything from his car across the street. Not for evidence. He wasn't planning a divorce court battle. These pictures were for psychological warfare. His phone rang. "Davidson? Cole, it's Frank. I pulled those records you wanted. Ryan Fletcher is interesting. Guy's been around the block, 3 different gyms in 5 years. Always leaves under questionable circumstances involving female clients. No criminal charges, but there's a pattern. Also, his lease on that BMW. It's in your wife's name. She's been paying for his car." "What else?" "Fletcher filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. Maxed out credit cards. Defaulted on a student loan. The works. Looks like your wife has been his meal ticket. There's more. She took out a personal loan 6 months ago. 25 grand at 18% interest. Guess who co-signed as her husband?" Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I never co-signed anything. Signature looks pretty authentic to me. Either she's gotten real good at forgery or someone helped her. I'm sending over the paperwork. You might want to file a fraud report." After Frank hung up, Cole sat in his car outside Lindsay's office building, processing the new information. Identity theft. Fraud. She hadn't just replaced him emotionally, she'd replaced him legally, financially. Used his military service record, his credit rating, his signature to fund her new life. That afternoon, Cole visited the bank. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, pulled up his accounts with obvious discomfort. "Mr. Davidson, I have to say your wife has been aggressive about accessing these accounts. She was here 2 weeks ago with a power of attorney document, trying to get your combat pay transferred to a joint account." "Did you allow it?" "No, sir. The document looked suspicious, and our policy requires both parties present for large transfers for military accounts. She wasn't happy about it." Cole thanked Patricia and left the bank with a clearer picture. Lindsay hadn't just stumbled into an affair. She'd planned this. The timing of his deployment extension, the gradual financial manipulation, the systematic alienation of his children. This was a calculated takeover of his life. That evening, Cole drove past his house again. Through the kitchen window, he could see them having dinner together. Ryan sat in Cole's chair at the head of the table, cutting Tyler's food. Lindsay laughed at something Ryan said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. His family. His life. His chair. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay. Cole, I know you're back. We need to talk. The kids miss you, but things are complicated now. Can we meet somewhere neutral? He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. At the hotel, Cole spread out everything he'd learned across the bed like pieces of a puzzle. Financial fraud, identity theft, systematic replacement, emotional manipulation of his children. Each crime, each betrayal, was a piece of ammunition in the war that Lindsay had started but didn't know she was fighting. Cole opened his laptop and began drafting the first phase of his counterattack. In the Rangers, they called it preparation of the battlefield, shaping the environment before the real fighting began. He started with Ryan Fletcher's employer, Golden Peak Fitness. A few carefully worded anonymous tips to the State Athletic Commission about unlicensed personal training and inappropriate client relationships. Then Morrison and Associates, where he discovered Lindsay's boss was a former Army colonel named Patricia Valdez. Colonel Valdez had been discharged for fraternization with subordinates. Information that would be very useful if she discovered one of her employees was embezzling to fund an affair. Next, Cole contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs about fraudulent use of his benefits. He filed identity theft reports with the credit bureaus and the police. Not because he wanted official action, but because he wanted paper trails, documentation. When the time came for his real attack, he wanted Lindsay and Ryan drowning in bureaucratic quicksand. Finally, he called Danny, in military intelligence again. I need deeper background checks, financial, criminal, personal, and Danny, I need you to run a credit monitoring alert on my social security number. I want to know every time someone tries to use my identity. Cole, what are you planning? What I was trained to do? Complete the mission. As he prepared for bed, Cole's phone buzzed again. Another text from Lindsay. Please, Cole, just talk to me. Don't make this harder than it has to be. He turned off the phone without reading the rest. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Cole woke to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. Lindsay's desperation was escalating, but that wasn't what interested him. The last call had come from a number he didn't recognize, followed by a voicemail that made him smile for the first time in days. Mr. Davidson, this is Melinda Chun from Morrison and Associates. I'm calling regarding some irregularities in Mrs. Davidson's employment file. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Phase 1 was already working. Cole showered, dressed, and drove to the industrial part of town where he'd located a storage unit facility. He rented a unit under his own name, nothing to hide, everything to declare. Then he drove to a tactical supply store run by another former Ranger. He purchased equipment that would have raised eyebrows at a civilian store but was perfectly normal for someone in his profession. Surveillance cameras, digital recorders, GPS tracking devices, all perfectly legal for a private citizen to own. By 10 a.m., Cole was parked outside Golden Peak Fitness, watching Ryan Fletcher's morning routine. The personal trainer moved between clients with practiced charm, his hands lingering a little too long on adjustments, his smile a little too intimate during conversations. Cole documented everything, noting which female clients seemed most responsive to Ryan's attention. At 11:30, Ryan's BMW pulled into the parking lot of an apartment complex across town. Cole followed at a distance, watching as Ryan disappeared into Building C, Unit 218. Not his official address. That was a shared apartment with 2 roommates on the other side of town. This was something else. Cole waited 45 minutes before a brunette in her 40s emerged from the same apartment, looking around nervously before getting into a Mercedes with Martinez Realty magnetic signs on the doors. Another client, another affair, another woman paying for Ryan's lifestyle. The pattern was becoming clear. Ryan Fletcher wasn't just unfaithful, he was a professional, a predator who targeted lonely women with disposable income. Lindsay wasn't special. She was just the most lucrative mark he'd found. Cole's phone rang. Davidson. Cole, it's Frank. That fraud report you filed. It triggered an automatic investigation with the bank. Lindsay's been trying to call you all morning because they've frozen her access to your accounts. Also, the VA called. Someone used your service number to apply for a disability claim increase last month. They want to interview you about potential identity theft. Set up the interview. And Frank, I need you to file a missing persons report. Missing persons? For who? For me. As far as anyone knows, Master Sergeant Cole Davidson hasn't returned from deployment. He's missing in action, presumed dead. His family believes he's still overseas. Frank was quiet for a moment. Cole, what are you doing? Legal reconnaissance. If I'm officially missing, then any financial activity in my name becomes suspicious. Any access to my accounts becomes fraud. Any claims about my whereabouts become false statements. After hanging up, Cole drove to his house. The BMW was gone. Ryan was at work. Lindsay's Honda sat in the driveway, and Cole could see her through the kitchen window, pacing while talking on the phone. Cole parked across the street and activated the parabolic microphone he'd purchased. Military-grade surveillance equipment designed for gathering intelligence at a distance. Through his headphones, Lindsay's voice came through clearly. I don't understand why the accounts are frozen. He's been gone for 4 years, Ryan. How can he freeze accounts from Afghanistan? No, I can't just go to his hotel. He's not responding to anything. What do you mean? What hotel? He's not even in the country. Cole smiled. Lindsay still thought he was deployed. She had no idea he was just 300 yards away, listening to every word. 24 hours. The loan payment is due in 24 hours. But that's $12,000, Ryan. I can't access any of Cole's military accounts. I know you need the car payment too, but the bank says there's some kind of investigation. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, revealing the complete financial structure of their scheme. The personal loan payments, the car lease, the credit cards, all dependent on Cole's income and credit rating, all now frozen while the banks investigated. At 2:30, Cole watched Lindsay leave to pick up the children from school. He waited until the street was clear, then approached his own house. The hidden key was still under the fake rock by the front door. Some things never changed. Inside, the house felt like a museum of his former life. Family photos still hung on the walls, but Ryan's clothes were in the master bedroom closet. Ryan's toiletries in the master bathroom. Ryan's protein powder in the kitchen. Cole moved through the house methodically, installing micro cameras in common areas, not in bedrooms or bathrooms. He wasn't a voyeur. These cameras were for gathering intelligence about conversations, about planning, about the enemy's decision-making process. In the home office, Cole found financial documents that confirmed everything Frank had discovered: forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, credit applications in his name. But more importantly, he found a manila folder labeled Divorce Strategy in Lindsay's handwriting. The contents made his blood run cold. Legal advice about military pensions, how to claim abandonment, how to argue that extended deployment constituted desertion, character witnesses who would testify that Cole had been abusive before deployment, a psychological evaluation of the children that portrayed them as traumatized by their father's unpredictable military personality. They weren't just planning to take his life. They were planning to destroy his reputation and his relationship with his children permanently. Cole photographed every document, then replaced them exactly as he'd found them. In the kitchen, he installed the final camera behind the refrigerator, angled to capture the breakfast table, where the family had their most important conversations. Then he paused, taking in the familiar smells, the distant sound of the garage door creaking with the afternoon breeze, and the quiet certainty that his battle for the truth, and for his family, was only just beginning. As he prepared to leave, Cole heard voices outside. Lindsay was back early. He moved to the window and saw her talking to Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had always been friendly to him. Through the parabolic microphone, he heard Mrs. Patterson say, "I could have sworn I saw someone who looked just like Cole this morning. Same height, same walk. But that's impossible, isn't it, dear? He's still deployed." "Absolutely impossible," Lindsay replied. But Cole could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Cole won't be back for at least another month. You must have seen someone else." But now she was suspicious. Cole could see it in her body language, the way she kept glancing at the house, at the street, at the shadows. He slipped out the back door and made his way to his car, satisfied with the day's work. The surveillance equipment was in place. The financial pressure was building, and most importantly, Lindsay was starting to realize that her carefully constructed lie was developing cracks. That evening, Cole reviewed the intelligence he'd gathered: financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud the military, perjury on legal documents. He had enough evidence to send both Lindsay and Ryan to federal prison. But prison was too easy, too clean, too merciful. Cole wanted something more permanent, something that would ensure they never hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt him, something that would teach his children that betrayal had consequences, even when, especially when, it came from family. He opened his laptop and began planning Phase 2. The next morning brought a flurry of panicked activity from Lindsay's house. Cole watched through his car window as she emerged 3 times in 20 minutes. First to check the mailbox, then to peer under cars parked on the street. Finally, to walk a complete circle around her own house, looking for signs of intrusion. She knew someone had been inside. Cole's surveillance cameras had captured the discovery. At 6:47 a.m., Lindsay had noticed that the manila folder in the office had been moved 2 inches to the left. At 7:15, she'd found a kitchen cabinet that hadn't been completely closed. Small details that most people would dismiss, but Lindsay was smart enough to recognize the pattern. "Ryan, someone was in my house," she'd said during their morning phone call, unaware that Cole was listening through the cameras he'd installed. "I can feel it. Things are different. Moved." "Ryan, you're being paranoid, baby. Who would break in and not take anything? Someone looking for information?" Ryan's laugh had been dismissive, but Cole could hear the nervousness underneath. "Information about what? You watch too many movies." Now, Cole sat in a different coffee shop, watching as Lindsay made her 3rd security check of the day. She was smart, but she was also isolated. She couldn't call the police about a break-in where nothing was stolen. She couldn't explain to friends why she was so paranoid. But every small sign left her more anxious, and Cole could see the effect beginning to show in the way she moved, tight and uncertain, always glancing over her shoulder. She was trapped in her own suspicions. Phase 2 was psychological pressure. Make them doubt themselves, their safety, their control. In Afghanistan, Cole had learned that the most effective warfare wasn't always about superior firepower. It was about breaking the enemy's will to fight. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you did to my family. Stay away, or I'll call the police." He smiled. Lindsay had gotten a burner phone, trying to threaten him from an untraceable number, but she'd made a tactical error. She revealed that she knew he was back. Cole typed back, "What family? I don't know who this is." The response came immediately. "Don't play games, Cole. I know you're in Colorado Springs. I'm sorry, but you have the wrong number. I'm Master Sergeant Cole Davidson, currently deployed in Afghanistan. If this is some kind of scam, I'll report it to military intelligence." A long pause. "Then you're lying." "Ma'am, I don't know who you are or what you want, but I'm in the middle of a combat zone. I haven't been in the United States in 4 years. Please don't contact this number again." Cole turned off the phone, satisfied with the first layer of psychological manipulation. Now Lindsay didn't know what to believe. Either Cole was still deployed and someone else had been in her house, or Cole was lying about his location and playing games with her mind. Either way, she was losing control of the narrative. At noon, Cole drove to Golden Peak Fitness. He'd identified 3 women who were having affairs with Ryan Fletcher. Lindsay, the real estate agent named Carmen Martinez, and a divorce attorney named Rebecca Walsh, whose marriage had been falling apart for 2 years. Cole approached Carmen Martinez first. She was leaving the gym after what appeared to be a very intimate training session with Ryan. "Excuse me, Mrs. Martinez. My name is Cole Davidson. I'm a private investigator working for Mrs. Rebecca Walsh. I wonder if I could ask you a few questions about Ryan Fletcher." Carmen's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." Cole showed her one of the photographs he'd taken of Ryan entering her apartment. "I'm not here to judge anyone, ma'am, but Mrs. Walsh's husband is filing for divorce, and he's hired me to document her affair. Mr. Fletcher's name keeps coming up in my investigation. I was wondering if you might be able to provide some character testimony about his reliability in romantic relationships." Carmen looked at the photograph, then at Cole, then back at the photograph. Is this the only copy? That depends on what you can tell me about Mr. Fletcher's other relationships. What Carmen told him over coffee was better than Cole had hoped. Ryan Fletcher wasn't just running multiple affairs, he was running multiple financial scams. Each woman believed she was his only client, his only lover, his only source of income. He'd borrowed money from Carmen for a supposed family emergency that never happened. He'd convinced Rebecca Walsh to pay for a vacation to Mexico where he'd actually taken Lindsay. He'd even gotten Carmen to co-sign for credit cards that he'd maxed out buying gifts for other women. How long has this been going on? Cole asked. With me, 8 months, but I think he might be seeing other people. I found receipts in his car for restaurants I've never been to, jewelry I've never seen him wear. Cole showed her a photograph of Lindsay. Have you ever seen this woman? Carmen's expression crumbled. That's his fiancée. He told me they broke up 6 months ago. Mrs. Martinez, Ryan Fletcher, isn't engaged to that woman. He's having an affair with her. She's married to someone else, a soldier who's been deployed for 4 years. Cole left Carmen Martinez with a complete dossier on Ryan Fletcher's other relationships, and a suggestion that she might want to contact Rebecca Walsh and compare notes. Then he drove to Rebecca Walsh's law office. Rebecca Walsh was a different kind of target. As a divorce attorney, she understood manipulation, deception, and the legal consequences of infidelity. But she was also vulnerable. Her own marriage was ending, and Ryan had positioned himself as her emotional support during the process. Mrs. Walsh, I represent Master Sergeant Cole Davidson. His wife has been conducting an affair with your boyfriend, Ryan Fletcher. My client is interested in a negotiated settlement rather than criminal charges, but that depends on your cooperation. Rebecca's professional composure cracked immediately. Criminal charges for what? Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy to defraud the military. Your boyfriend and Mrs. Davidson have been forging my client's signature on financial documents, using his military benefits illegally, and planning to claim abandonment while he was serving overseas. Cole placed a manila folder on her desk. These are copies of the forged documents. These are bank records showing fraudulent access to military accounts. This is a recording of your boyfriend and Mrs. Davidson discussing how to hide assets during divorce proceedings. Rebecca opened the folder with shaking hands. As a lawyer, she recognized immediately how damaging this evidence was. What do you want? She asked. I want you to understand that Ryan Fletcher is a professional con artist. He's not in love with you, Mrs. Walsh. He's using you for money and legal advice, and when this all comes out, and it will come out, you'll be disbarred for conflict of interest and potentially charged as an accessory to fraud. Cole stood up to leave, then turned back at the door. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to be a witness for the prosecution rather than a defendant. That evening, Cole's surveillance cameras captured the meltdown he had orchestrated. Rebecca Walsh arrived at Lindsay's house at 6:30 p.m., furious and armed with legal documents. Carmen Martinez showed up 20 minutes later, equally angry. Ryan Fletcher arrived to find 3 women waiting for him in the living room. Cole listened to the confrontation through his hidden microphones, eating dinner in his hotel room while his adversaries unraveled each other. You told me she was your ex-fiancée, Rebecca was saying. You told me Rebecca was just a client, Carmen added. You told me they were both ancient history, Lindsay finished. Ryan's attempts to explain, to lie, to manipulate all 3 women simultaneously were almost entertaining. But what interested Cole more was how quickly they turned on each other. Rebecca threatened to expose the financial fraud. Carmen demanded her money back. Lindsay accused Ryan of using her children to manipulate her emotions. By 8 p.m., Ryan Fletcher had been thrown out of Cole's house by 3 angry women, who were now comparing notes about his deceptions. By 9 p.m., Rebecca Walsh was explaining to Lindsay and Carmen exactly what criminal charges they were all facing. By 10 p.m., Lindsay was calling Cole's phone, crying. Cole, please, we need to talk. I know you're back. I know you know everything. Just please let me explain. Cole listened to the entire voicemail, then deleted it without responding. Tomorrow, he would begin Phase 3. Cole woke to the sound of his hotel room phone ringing. The front desk informed him that a woman claiming to be his wife was in the lobby demanding to see him. She'd been there since 6 a.m. "Tell her Master Sergeant Davidson is not currently registered at this hotel," Cole instructed. "If she continues to loiter, call the police." Through his window, Cole could see Lindsay's Honda in the parking lot. She'd been reduced to staking out hotels, desperately trying to find him. The psychological pressure was working. She was becoming increasingly erratic, increasingly desperate. Cole ordered room service and spent the morning reviewing the intelligence from his surveillance cameras. The confrontation between Lindsay, Ryan, and his other victims had revealed crucial information. Rebecca Walsh had been providing legal advice about the divorce strategy. Carmen Martinez had been helping finance Ryan's lifestyle through a business account she managed. All three women were now potential co-conspirators in a federal fraud case. But even more importantly, they were now at war with each other. Rebecca was threatening to turn state's evidence. Carmen was demanding financial restitution. Lindsay was trying to distance herself from the financial crimes while still maintaining her relationship with Ryan. Cole's phone rang. It was Frank Russo. "Cole, we have a problem. Lindsay hired a lawyer, some hotshot from Denver named Mitchell Grant. He's filing for an emergency custody hearing, claiming you've abandoned your children and are psychologically unstable. He's also requesting a restraining order, saying you've been stalking and harassing her." "On what evidence?" "The break-in at your house, the mysterious phone calls, the fact that you haven't contacted your children since returning from deployment. They're painting you as a dangerous veteran with PTSD who's become fixated on destroying his family." Cole smiled. Perfect. "Cole, if they get that restraining order, you won't be able to see Emma and Tyler. If they get emergency custody, it could take months to reverse." "Frank, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. File a counter-motion requesting a psychological evaluation of both parents. Request a forensic audit of all financial accounts, and most importantly, request that all parties submit to polygraph examinations regarding their truthfulness in sworn statements. Polygraphs aren't admissible in Colorado family court." "I don't care about admissible. I care about pressure. Lindsay and her lawyer know they've filed fraudulent documents. They know they've perjured themselves in sworn statements. The threat of a polygraph will make them panic." "What about the stalking allegations?" "I haven't stalked anyone. I've conducted legal surveillance on my own property and in public spaces. But Frank, make sure the judge knows that Master Sergeant Davidson has been officially missing in action for the past week. Make sure they know that the military has no record of him returning to the United States." Cole hung up and immediately called Danny in military intelligence. "Danny, I need a favor. I need my official status to show that I'm still deployed, still in Afghanistan, and that any reports of me being in the United States are unconfirmed." "Cole, that's going to require some creative paperwork." "Danny, you owe me for Kabul. This squares us." That afternoon, Cole drove to the courthouse for the emergency hearing. He wore his full-dress uniform, every ribbon and medal in perfect alignment. The psychological impact was immediate. Everyone in the courtroom, from the bailiff to the judge, straightened unconsciously when he entered. Lindsay was there with Mitchell Grant, a silver-haired attorney in an expensive suit. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Ryan Fletcher sat in the back row, trying to look supportive while clearly wishing to be anywhere else. "Your Honor," Grant began, "my client has been terrorized by her husband since his alleged return from military deployment. Despite having no confirmed evidence that Sergeant Davidson is actually in the country, someone matching his description has been conducting surveillance on her home, breaking into her residence, and making threatening phone calls." Judge Patricia Valdez, the same former Army colonel that Cole had researched, looked up from the file. "Counselor, according to the documents filed by Mr. Russo, Master Sergeant Davidson is currently on active duty in Afghanistan. The Department of Defense has no record of him returning to the United States." Grant looked confused. "Your Honor, that's impossible. My client has received phone calls from Afghanistan." Frank Russo interrupted, standing tall. "Your Honor, my client has been serving his country in a combat zone for 4 years." Any phone calls he's made have been from his forward operating base. Any text messages have been sent through military communication channels with significant delay. Judge Valdez turned to Lindsay. Mrs. Davidson, you're alleging that your husband has been physically present in Colorado Springs conducting surveillance and breaking into your home, but the military says he's in Afghanistan. Can you explain this discrepancy? Lindsay looked at her lawyer, then at Cole, then back at the judge. I know it was him. I know my husband. Do you have any photographic evidence, video evidence? Any witnesses who can confirm that the person you saw was actually Master Sergeant Davidson and not someone who merely resembled him? No, but... Mrs. Davidson, Judge Valdez continued, I'm looking at your financial records as part of this custody filing. Can you explain why you've been accessing your husband's military accounts without authorization? Can you explain these loan applications that appear to have forged signatures? Grant stood quickly. Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to review these financial documents. Denied. Mrs. Davidson, you filed for emergency custody based on allegations that your husband is psychologically unstable and dangerous. But the evidence suggests that while he's been serving overseas, you've been committing financial fraud and identity theft. Would you like to explain this? Cole watched Lindsay crumble under the judge's questions. Every lie she'd built her case on was collapsing under legal scrutiny. She couldn't prove he'd been stalking her without admitting that she'd been lying about his deployment status. She couldn't maintain her financial innocence without explaining the forged documents. Your Honor, Judge Valdez said finally, I'm dismissing this emergency custody motion. Mrs. Davidson, you will return the children to Master Sergeant Davidson immediately upon his return from deployment. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into the financial irregularities in this case. If criminal charges are warranted, they will be filed. But Your Honor, Grant protested, the children's safety is not threatened by a man who's been serving his country in Afghanistan. It appears to be threatened by a mother who's been committing federal crimes and using them as weapons in her schemes. As the court session ended, Cole watched Lindsay stumble out of the courtroom, her face ashen. Ryan Fletcher tried to approach her, but she pushed him away. Grant looked like he was reconsidering his entire legal career. Cole remained in his seat until the courtroom was empty, then approached Judge Valdez. Your Honor, I wanted to thank you for your service. I know it takes courage for a fellow veteran to hold civilians accountable for their treatment of military families. Judge Valdez studied him carefully. Master Sergeant Davidson, I have to ask, are you actually in Afghanistan right now? Cole met her gaze steadily. Your Honor, according to all official military records, I am currently deployed in a combat zone serving my country as I have for the past 4 years. Any suggestion otherwise would require evidence that no one seems able to provide. Judge Valdez nodded slowly. Understood, Sergeant. And Sergeant, I hope you find justice for what's been done to your family. Cole left the courthouse knowing that Phase 3 was complete. Lindsay's legal strategy had collapsed. Her financial crimes were under investigation, her relationship with Ryan was crumbling, and most importantly, she now knew that he was watching her with the same methodical precision he'd once used against enemy combatants. But Cole wasn't finished. Not even close. Phase 4 would be personal. That evening, Cole sat in his hotel room, monitoring the surveillance feeds from his house. The cameras had captured Lindsay's return from court, defeated, desperate, and finally beginning to understand the scope of her situation. She'd spent an hour on the phone with her lawyer, another hour crying in the kitchen, and finally called her mother in Denver. Mom, I need help. Everything's falling apart. The court case, the money, Ryan, and Cole. He's like a ghost. I know he's here, but no one believes me. Cole listened to Lindsay's mother offering empty comfort, urging her to work things out, reminding her that marriage was a sacred commitment, and encouraging her to think of the children. What interested Cole more was what happened after she hung up. Lindsay sat Emma and Tyler down at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd celebrated countless birthdays and holidays as a family. Through the hidden camera, Cole could see his children clearly for the first time since returning. Emma had grown taller, her blonde hair longer, her face more mature. Tyler still gripped the toy airplane Cole had sent him. Even after all this time, both children looked confused and tired. Casualties in a war they didn't understand. "Kids, we need to talk about Daddy," Lindsay began, her voice carefully controlled. "You know how I told you that Daddy might not come home from the army? Well, there's a chance he might try to visit us soon, but it might not be safe." Emma, always the more perceptive child, frowned. "Why wouldn't Daddy be safe? Is he hurt?" "No, sweetheart. Sometimes when soldiers come home from war, they're different. Their minds get sick. They might do things that seem scary or confusing." Cole felt his hands clench into fists. She was poisoning his children against him, using their innocent trust to build a foundation of fear. "But Daddy loves us," Tyler said, clutching his airplane. "He sends me toys." "I know, baby, Daddy does love you, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people change in ways that make them dangerous, even to the people they love most." Emma was old enough to detect the inconsistency. "Mommy, you said Daddy was still in Afghanistan. If he's still fighting, how could he visit us?" Lindsay hesitated, trapped between her lies. "Well, sweetie, sometimes soldiers come home without permission. Sometimes they get confused about where they're supposed to be." "You mean Daddy might be AWOL?" Emma asked, using a military term she'd obviously learned from Cole. "Something like that. So if a man who looks like Daddy comes to our house, we need to call the police, okay? Even if he says he's your father, even if he looks just like him, we need to be very careful." Cole had heard enough. He turned off the surveillance feed and sat in the dark hotel room, processing what he'd just witnessed. Lindsay wasn't just stealing his money or his marriage. She was stealing his children's memories of him. She was turning his sacrifice into a threat, his service into a sickness. That was unforgivable. Cole picked up his phone and called Frank Russo. "Frank, I need you to arrange something. I want to see my children, but not at the house. Somewhere neutral, somewhere safe, and I want it to be a surprise." "Cole, the custody situation is complicated. The judge awarded me access to my children. Lindsay has been violating that order by telling them I'm dangerous and not to trust me. I want them to remember who their father really is before she poisons them completely." "Where do you want to meet them?" "The park where I used to take them, Miller's Grove, Friday afternoon after school. And Frank, I want you to be there as a witness to everything that happens." Friday afternoon, Cole arrived at Miller's Grove Elementary School wearing civilian clothes. Jeans, a Colorado Rockies t-shirt, the baseball cap Emma had given him for Father's Day 3 years ago. He looked like any other dad picking up his kids, nothing threatening or military or dangerous. He waited by the playground where he'd pushed Emma on the swings, where he'd taught Tyler to throw a baseball, where they'd spent countless afternoons before his deployment, the same playground where he'd promised them he'd come home safe. At 3:15, the school dismissal bell rang. Cole watched the stream of children emerge from the building, searching for familiar faces. Then he saw them, Emma walking with careful responsibility, Tyler skipping beside her, both looking for Lindsay's Honda. Cole stepped out from behind the tree where he'd been waiting. "Emma? Tyler?" Emma turned at the sound of his voice, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, she looked exactly like she had at 3 years old, running to greet him after long training exercises. "Daddy," she whispered. Tyler's reaction was immediate and pure. He dropped his backpack and ran toward Cole at full speed, launching himself into his father's arms with the absolute trust that only children possess. "Daddy, Daddy, you came home. Mommy said you might not come home, but you did. You came home." Cole caught his son, feeling 4 years of separation collapse into this single moment. Tyler wrapped his arms around Cole's neck and held on like he'd never let go. Emma followed, more cautious but no less emotional. She stood just a few feet away, her eyes searching his face for reassurance, hope, and all the answers she'd been longing for. Emma was more cautious, approaching slowly. At 6, she was old enough to remember the warnings Lindsay had given her, but she was also old enough to recognize that this man, her father, didn't seem dangerous or sick or frightening. "Daddy, are you supposed to be here?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Cole knelt down so he could look directly into her eyes, Tyler still clinging to him. "Emma, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be with my children." But Mommy said, "Emma, what do you remember about me? Before I left for the army, what kind of daddy was I?" Emma's face crumpled slightly. "You were the best daddy. You read us stories and made pancakes and taught me to ride my bike without training wheels. Do you remember what I promised you before I left? You said you'd come home safe. And here I am, home and safe." Tyler pulled back to look at his father's face. "Daddy, why does Mommy say you're sick? You don't look sick." Cole felt his heart break and harden simultaneously. "Tyler, sometimes grown-ups say things when they're scared or confused. Mommy isn't lying on purpose, but she's wrong about me being sick." "Are you going to live with us again?" Emma asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Cole could have said yes, could have made promises about rebuilding their family, could have painted a picture of happily ever after. Instead, he chose honesty. "I don't know, sweetheart. Mommy and I have some grown-up problems to solve first. But I want you both to know that no matter what happens, no matter where I live or where you live, I will always be your daddy. I will always love you, and I will always keep my promises to you." They spent an hour at the playground. Cole pushed Emma on the swings and threw a football with Tyler. They talked about school and friends and the toys he'd sent them from Afghanistan. For 1 hour, they were simply a father and his children, nothing more complicated than that. When Lindsay's Honda pulled into the parking lot, Cole could see the panic on her face through the windshield. She'd obviously gotten a call from the school, probably had driven there in terror, expecting to find police cars and ambulances. Instead, she found her children laughing with their father on the playground where they'd always played. Cole saw her approach but didn't acknowledge her immediately. Instead, he knelt down to Emma and Tyler one more time. "I have to go now, but I want you both to remember this. No matter what anyone tells you about your daddy, no matter what stories you hear, you remember this day. You remember that when I came home, I wasn't scary or dangerous or sick. I was just your daddy who loves you more than anything in the world." "When will we see you again?" Tyler asked. "Soon," Cole promised. "Very soon." As Cole walked past Lindsay toward his car, she grabbed his arm. "How dare you approach my children without permission? I'll call the police." "I'll call the police," Lindsay spat. But Cole turned to look at her and she stepped back involuntarily. The man looking back at her wasn't the husband she remembered. This was someone else entirely. Someone forged in combat and tempered by betrayal. "They're my children too, Lindsay, and unlike you, I don't break my promises to them." Cole drove away, leaving Lindsay to explain to Emma and Tyler why their perfectly normal, loving father was supposed to be dangerous. He knew the children would remember this day for the rest of their lives. They would remember that their father had kept his promise to come home safe, and they would remember that it was their mother who had lied to them about everything else. The emergency custody hearing had been scheduled for Monday morning, triggered by Lindsay's frantic call to her lawyer after finding Cole with the children. But as Cole sat in the courthouse waiting room, he knew this hearing would be different. The children had seen him now. They'd had their own experience to compare against their mother's warnings. Judge Valdez called the court to order with obvious frustration. "We're here because Mrs. Davidson claims that her husband violated custody arrangements by approaching their children at school. However, my review of the case file shows that no such custody arrangements existed. Master Sergeant Davidson was awarded standard parental access rights pending resolution of the financial fraud investigation." Mitchell Grant, Lindsay's lawyer, stood up. "Your Honor, my client was concerned for her children's safety." "Based on what evidence, Counselor?" Judge Valdez interrupted. "Last week you argued that Sergeant Davidson was psychologically unstable, but the military psychiatrist's report shows no evidence of PTSD or any other mental health issues. You argued that he was dangerous and unpredictable, but multiple witnesses, including a school principal and 2 teachers, testified that his interaction with his children was completely normal and appropriate." Cole watched Lindsay shifting uncomfortably in her chair. The children's teachers had been called as witnesses, and their testimony had been devastating to her case. Emma's teacher had described watching a perfectly ordinary father playing with his children. Tyler's teacher had noted that Tyler seemed happier and more settled after seeing his father. Most damaging of all was the testimony from Frank Russo, who had witnessed the entire encounter. As an officer of the court, his word carried significant weight. "Mrs. Davidson," Judge Valdez continued, "I'm troubled by the pattern I'm seeing in your testimony. You've made multiple claims that have proven to be false or exaggerated. You've alleged that your husband was stalking you but provided no evidence. You've claimed he was dangerous to your children, but the evidence shows the opposite. You've submitted financial documents that appear to contain forged signatures." Grant tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, if we could focus on the custody issue." "We are focusing on the custody issue, Counselor," Judge Valdez cut in sharply. "I'm trying to determine which parent is acting in the best interests of these children, and based on the evidence, it appears that Mrs. Davidson has been lying to them about their father, potentially causing psychological harm." Cole watched Lindsay closely, seeing her carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. The pressure of her lies, the financial investigation, the loss of her relationship with Ryan, it was all coming apart at the seams. "Your Honor," Judge Valdez said, her gaze direct and unwavering on Lindsay, "I'm ordering a custody evaluation by a qualified child psychologist. During this evaluation, both children will be interviewed separately about their relationships with both parents. I'm also ordering that Master Sergeant Davidson be granted supervised visitation rights pending the completion of this evaluation." "But, Your Honor," Grant protested, "the safety concerns are unfounded and possibly fabricated. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal charges related to the financial fraud allegations. Mrs. Davidson, you have the right to remain silent, but anything you say in this courtroom can be used against you in criminal proceedings." Lindsay went pale. This wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about prison time. As they left the courthouse, Cole overheard Grant quietly telling Lindsay that her case was falling apart. "You need to consider a plea bargain," he was saying. "The financial evidence is overwhelming. If this goes to trial, you could be looking at federal charges." That afternoon, Cole's surveillance cameras recorded a meeting at his house that he'd anticipated for some time. Ryan Fletcher, Carmen Martinez, and Rebecca Walsh arrived within minutes of one another. The three victims of Ryan's cons were now united, comparing notes and planning their next move. Through his hidden microphones, Cole listened as Rebecca, the attorney, laid out the legal situation. "We're all facing potential criminal charges as accessories to fraud," she explained. "The prosecution is going to argue that we knowingly participated in a scheme to defraud a military serviceman. Our only chance is to cooperate fully and demonstrate that we were victims of Ryan's manipulation." Carmen, however, cared less about legal arguments than about reclaiming what she'd lost. "I want my money back, $37,000 over 8 months. I don't care about the legal stuff. I want Ryan to pay me back." Ryan looked panicked and desperate, like a cornered animal. Ladies, we can work this out. Nobody needs to go to prison. Nobody needs to turn on anybody else. We need to tell the truth," Rebecca interrupted coldly. "Ryan, you lied to all of us. You manipulated all of us. You used all of us. And now we're all facing criminal charges because of your schemes." "What truth?" Ryan challenged. "That you all willingly gave me money? That you all knew I was seeing other people? That you all helped me access Cole Davidson's accounts because you thought it would benefit you?" The room went silent. Ryan had just confessed to the fraud on tape in front of 3 witnesses, and Cole's surveillance system had captured every word. Carmen was the first to break the silence. "I never knew about the identity theft. You told me Cole Davidson had given you permission to use his accounts. I never knew about the forged signatures," Rebecca added. "You told me Lindsay had power of attorney." "And I never knew about either of them," Lindsay said, her voice barely audible. "You told me they were just friends, just clients." Ryan realized his mistake too late. In trying to shift blame to the women, he'd forced them to confess their own ignorance of the larger scheme. He'd essentially provided Cole with 3 prosecution witnesses who could testify, honestly, that they'd been deceived about the extent of the fraud. Cole turned off the surveillance feed and called the number Danny had given him for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. "Agent Sarah Mitchell, this is Cole Davidson. I have evidence of a federal fraud scheme that I think you'll find interesting." 2 hours later, Cole met Agent Mitchell at a coffee shop downtown. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in military-related financial crimes. "Sergeant Davidson, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence from the bank investigation. This appears to be a sophisticated identity theft scheme. How much evidence do you have?" Cole handed her a thumb drive. Recorded confessions, forged documents, financial records, witness testimony, everything you need for a conviction. Agent Mitchell plugged the drive into her laptop and began reviewing the files. Her eyebrows rose as she listened to the recorded conversations. "This is comprehensive. How did you gather all this?" "Legal surveillance on my own property and in public spaces. Everything was obtained without violating anyone's Fourth Amendment rights." "Sergeant, this is enough evidence to prosecute all 4 co-conspirators for multiple federal crimes. Identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the military. We're looking at potential sentences of 5 to 10 years each." Cole nodded. "Agent Mitchell, I want to make something clear. I'm not interested in revenge prosecutions. I'm interested in justice. These people stole from me while I was serving my country. They manipulated my children. They tried to destroy my life. But most importantly, they're likely to do this to other military families if they're not stopped." "What are you proposing?" "I want them to face consequences proportional to their crimes. Ryan Fletcher is the ringleader. He should face the harshest sentence. The women were victims too, but they also participated knowingly in parts of the scheme. I want the prosecution to reflect that reality." Agent Mitchell closed her laptop. "We'll need you to testify before a grand jury. Are you prepared for that, Sergeant?" "I've been preparing for this moment since the day I received my wife's text message." As Cole left the coffee shop, his phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay. "Please, Cole, can we meet? Just the 2 of us. I'll tell you everything. I'll make this right. Please don't destroy our family." Cole stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "You destroyed our family. I'm just documenting the damage." But even as he sent the message, Cole knew that the real war was just beginning. The legal system would handle the financial crimes, but the battle for his children's future would be fought on a different battlefield entirely. The grand jury indictments came down on a Thursday morning. Ryan Fletcher, conspiracy to commit identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the military. Lindsay Davidson, accessory to identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury. Carmen Martinez and Rebecca Walsh, accessory to wire fraud, although their cooperation with federal investigators had earned them recommendations for plea deals. Cole was sitting in Frank Russo's office when the news broke. "Ryan's looking at 7 to 10 years, Frank reported, reading from the federal prosecutor's summary. Lindsay could get 3 to 5, but they're offering her a deal if she testifies against Ryan and provides full restitution." "What about the children?" "That's where it gets complicated. The custody evaluation is complete and the psychologist wants to interview you and Lindsay together. She wants to see how you interact, how you handle conflict, how you discuss the children's welfare." Cole had been dreading this moment. For months he'd been the invisible force dismantling Lindsay's life from the shadows. Now he would have to face her directly in front of a professional who would be evaluating his fitness as a parent. The custody evaluation office was sterile and impersonal, designed to be neutral territory for hostile parents. Dr. Michelle Santos was a child psychologist with 20 years of experience in high-conflict custody cases. "Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, I've interviewed both Emma and Tyler extensively. I've also reviewed the criminal case files and the evidence in the fraud investigation. Before we discuss custody arrangements, I need to understand something." Dr. Santos turned to Lindsay. Mrs. Davidson, can you explain to me why you told your children that their father was dangerous and psychologically unstable when you had no evidence to support those claims? Lindsay looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. The stress of the criminal charges, the financial pressure, and the social isolation had taken their toll. I was scared. I thought Cole might hurt them. Based on what evidence? He was different. When I knew he was back, he was acting strange. Watching me. Following me. Dr. Santos consulted her notes. Mrs. Davidson, during my interviews with Emma and Tyler, both children described their father's behavior as completely normal and loving. Emma specifically said that her father wasn't scary like Mommy said he would be. Tyler said his father played with me just like before. Can you explain this discrepancy? Lindsay glanced at Cole, then back at Dr. Santos. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong about him being dangerous. Mrs. Davidson, were you lying to your children about their father's mental state in order to prevent them from wanting to see him? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Cole watched Lindsay struggle with an answer that wouldn't incriminate her further. I thought I was protecting them, she said finally. Dr. Santos turned to Cole. Mr. Davidson, you conducted surveillance on your wife and her associates for several months before revealing your presence. Can you explain your decision-making process? Cole had prepared for this question. Dr. Santos, when I returned from deployment, I discovered that my wife had been conducting an affair, stealing my identity, and manipulating my children. As a military officer, I was trained to gather intelligence before taking action. I needed to understand the full scope of the situation before determining how to protect my children's interests. Did you consider simply approaching your wife directly to discuss the situation? Ma'am, my wife had already demonstrated that she was willing to lie, steal, and manipulate. Direct confrontation would have given her time to cover her tracks, hide evidence, and further poison my children against me. My priority was gathering the truth. Dr. Santos made notes on her legal pad. Mr. Davidson, during your surveillance activities, did you ever consider the psychological impact on your wife? Did you intend to cause her emotional distress? Cole met her gaze steadily. Dr. Santos, my wife caused me 4 years of emotional distress by conducting an affair, stealing my money, and lying to my children. If my investigation caused her stress, that was a consequence of her own actions, not my intention. Mrs. Davidson, Dr. Santos continued, you've been romantically involved with Ryan Fletcher for approximately 10 months. During this time, did you introduce him to your children as a father figure? Lindsay's face flushed. Ryan was helping me with the children. They needed a male role model while Cole was gone. Did you encourage your children to call Mr. Fletcher Daddy or refer to him as their father? Sometimes. Tyler was so young he barely remembered Cole. Mrs. Davidson, Tyler is 4 years old. His father deployed when he was 6 months old. Are you saying that a 4-year-old has no capacity to understand who his biological father is? Cole watched Lindsay realize she'd walked into a trap. Any argument that Tyler was too young to remember him would contradict her earlier claims that the children were afraid of him. I just thought it would be less confusing for them to have stability. Dr. Santos was relentless. Children need stability, Mrs. Davidson, but they also need honesty and the opportunity to build real relationships with both of their parents. Stability is not achieved by deception. Mrs. Davidson, is it fair to say that you actively encouraged your children to replace their father with your boyfriend while their father was serving overseas in a combat zone? Lindsay began crying. I was alone for 4 years. 4 years. Do you know what it's like to raise 2 children alone while your husband is off playing soldier? The room went silent. Cole felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Mrs. Davidson, Dr. Santos said quietly, did you just refer to your husband's military service as playing soldier? Lindsay realized what she'd said, but it was too late. The mask had slipped completely. I didn't mean... Mrs. Davidson, your husband was deployed in Afghanistan for 4 years, serving his country in a combat zone. During that time, you committed federal crimes using his identity, conducted an affair, and tried to erase him from his children's lives. And you just characterized his sacrifice as playing soldier. Cole stood up. Dr. Santos, I think this evaluation is complete. I'd like to request full custody of my children. Dr. Santos looked at Lindsay, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Mrs. Davidson, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Through her tears, Lindsay looked at Cole. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt the children. Please, Cole, please don't take them away from me completely. Cole studied his wife, his ex-wife, in all but legal paperwork, and felt nothing but contempt. Lindsay, you made your choice when you decided that another man was more important than your children's father. You made your choice when you decided that stealing my money was more important than my sacrifice. You made your choice when you decided to poison my children against me. He turned to Dr. Santos. I'll be filing for full custody with supervised visitation for Mrs. Davidson, pending completion of her criminal sentence. As Cole left the evaluation office, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The war was nearly over. Soon, his children would be safe from their mother's manipulations. Soon, justice would be served. But first, he had one final conversation to have with Ryan Fletcher. Cole found Ryan Fletcher at Golden Peak Fitness, training a new client, a young blonde woman who looked barely old enough to drink. Even facing federal charges and the collapse of his entire scheme, Ryan was still hunting for new victims. Cole waited in the parking lot until Ryan's session ended, then approached him as he walked to his car, or rather, to Lindsay's BMW, which had been repossessed 3 days earlier when she missed the payment. Ryan Fletcher turned, and Cole saw fear flicker across his face before he tried to mask it with false bravado. Cole, finally showing yourself, huh? I was wondering when you'd grow the courage to face me directly. Cole smiled, a cold expression that made Ryan take an involuntary step backward. I wanted to thank you, actually. You're thanking me for sleeping with your wife? Ryan, you did me a favor. You exposed a cancer in my life before it could spread any further. You revealed that the woman I married was capable of betraying everything she claimed to believe in. You showed me that my children needed protection from their own mother. Cole pulled out his phone and showed Ryan a text message. This is from Emma, my 6-year-old daughter. She sent it yesterday. The message read, Daddy, Tyler, and I want to live with you. Mommy cries all the time and she's always angry. Can you come get us? You see, Ryan, children are remarkable judges of character. They can sense authenticity. They can tell the difference between someone who genuinely loves them and someone who's using them as weapons in an adult conflict. Ryan was backing toward his car now, clearly wanting to end this conversation. Look, man, I'm sorry about how things went down. I never meant for it to get so complicated. Oh, but it's not complicated at all. It's actually very simple. You're a predator who targets vulnerable women. You manipulate them emotionally and exploit them financially. You destroyed my marriage, corrupted my wife, and traumatized my children. And now you're going to pay for all of it. The federal charges aren't my fault, Ryan said desperately. Lindsay handled all the financial stuff. I didn't know she was forging signatures or stealing your identity. Cole pulled out a small digital recorder and played a clip from one of his surveillance recordings. Ryan's own voice, saying, We just need to be careful about how we access Cole's accounts. If we keep the withdrawals small and spread them out, nobody will notice until he gets back. Ryan's face went white. You recorded me? I recorded everything, Ryan. Every conversation, every plan, every crime. The FBI has it all. Cole stepped closer, and Ryan pressed back against his car. But here's what the FBI doesn't know, Ryan. Here's what I haven't shared with them yet. Cole pulled out his phone again and showed Ryan a series of photographs. Carmen Martinez isn't the only married woman you've been manipulating. Jessica Hendricks, the real estate agent who sold you the apartment where you meet your conquests. Monica Liu, the bank manager who helped you process the fraudulent loans. Sarah Wilson, the city clerk who expedited your business licenses. Each photograph showed Ryan in intimate situations with different women who were all married, all in positions that could help his schemes, all victims of his manipulation. 14 women, Ryan. 14 married women with careers, families, reputations. All of them helping you commit crimes because they thought you loved them. All of them facing potential prosecution as accessories to your schemes. Ryan was shaking. You can't prove any of that. It's just pictures. It's just speculation. Cole smiled coldly. It's not just pictures, Ryan. It's evidence. It's testimony from women who are willing to testify against you to save themselves. It's a pattern of behavior that's as clear as day, and it's all backed up by the recordings I've made of your conversations with Lindsay, with Carmen, with Rebecca. You're finished, Ryan. You're going to prison for a very long time. And when you get out, if you ever get out, you'll find that the world has moved on without you. Your victims will have moved on. Your schemes will have been exposed, and you'll be left with nothing but the consequences of your actions. Ryan's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but Cole stood firm. You can't run from this, Ryan. You can't hide. You can't manipulate your way out of it. It's over. Cole turned and walked away, leaving Ryan alone in the parking lot, his world crumbling around him. As he drove away, Cole felt a sense of closure. The battle was won. The war was over. His children were safe, and justice had been served. Now what do you want? I want you to understand the scope of what you've done. You didn't just steal money, Ryan. You destroyed families. You corrupted good people. You turned mothers into criminals and wives into liars. 14 families, Ryan. 14 marriages that you poisoned with your greed and narcissism. Cole put his phone away and leaned against Ryan's car, trapping him. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to plead guilty to all federal charges. You're going to accept the maximum sentence without appeal. You're going to provide full restitution to all your victims, even if it takes you the rest of your life. And if I don't, Cole's smile turned predatory. I release all the evidence about your other victims to their husbands. 14 husbands, Ryan. Some of them are police officers. Some are military. Some are just angry men who don't like being made fools of. Ryan understood the threat immediately. Cole wasn't just promising legal consequences. He was promising that Ryan would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. You're threatening me, Ryan said weakly. I'm offering you a choice. Face justice through the legal system or face justice through more traditional means. Your call. Cole pushed off from the car and started walking away, then turned back. Oh, and Ryan, that young woman you were training today, her name is Madison Pierce. She's 19 years old, and her father is Colonel James Pierce, commanding officer of the 4th Infantry Division. You might want to find a different gym. As Cole drove away, he felt a profound sense of completion. The war was over. Justice had been served, and would continue to be served through the courts and through the natural consequences of Ryan's choices. 3 months later, Cole sat in his new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom place near Emma and Tyler's school, helping Tyler with his homework while Emma practiced piano. The custody battle had ended with Cole receiving full custody and Lindsay getting supervised weekend visits after she completed her sentence. Lindsay had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of probation. Ryan Fletcher received 7 years. The other women involved had received probation and community service in exchange for their cooperation. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Frank Russo. Divorce finalized. Household proceeds split according to court order. It's finally over. Cole looked around his apartment, modest but clean, filled with his children's laughter and their artwork on the refrigerator, and realized that Frank was wrong. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. Daddy, Emma said from the piano bench, are you happy now? Cole considered the question seriously. Was he happy? He was no longer married to a woman who had betrayed everything they'd built together. His children were safe from manipulation and lies. Justice had been served against those who had wronged them. He had his honor, his integrity, and his future. I am, he said finally, smiling at his daughter. "I am happy now." "Yes, sweetheart," he said finally. "I'm happy now." "Good," Emma said, turning back to her piano. "Tyler and I like it when you're happy." Cole Davidson had left for Afghanistan as a husband and father. He'd returned as something else entirely. A guardian, a protector, a man who understood that some betrayals could never be forgiven, some lines could never be uncrossed. He learned that mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford, that sentiment was a weakness that others would exploit, and that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to ensure the guilty faced consequences. Most importantly, he learned that family wasn't just about blood or marriage or legal documents. Family was about loyalty, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged by truth and tested by adversity. And in the end, that was enough.